If there's one thing I know for certain in this life, it's that no man ever wakes up in the morning thinking, today's the day my wife will shatter my reality like a cheap snow globe. No, we wake up, stretch, maybe check if we've still got the same number of hairs on our head as we did yesterday, and go about our business assuming that life will continue as expected. And then, life, in all its glorious unpredictability, decides to kick you in the ribs when you're least expecting it. It all started with a ceiling fan, not the metaphorical kind, not some profound symbol of our crumbling marriage. No, a literal ceiling fan, a wobbly, outdated piece of junk that had been making a noise somewhere between an old engine struggling for its last breath and a desperate pigeon trapped inside a tin can. Victoria had been complaining about it for months. "Adam, we really need to fix that thing," she said one evening, sipping her chamomile tea like a woman who had never in her life known the struggle of sweating through an August in Ohio. "I feel like it's going to finish me in my sleep. Not everything in this house is out to get you, Victoria," I had replied at the time. That was a lie, but I didn't know it yet. So, one fine Saturday afternoon, I finally dragged out the ladder, rolled up my sleeves, and climbed up to do my husbandly duty. I figured it would take 15, maybe 20 minutes tops. A quick tightening of some screws, a little oil, and I could return to my sacred weekend ritual of doing absolutely nothing. And that's when I found it, tucked away on the top of the fan blades, so carefully hidden that it would have gone unnoticed for years if not for my random burst of motivation. A small, folded piece of paper. Now, I'm not saying I immediately suspected anything. A piece of paper stuck to the top of a fan? Sure, weird. But we've all misplaced things in baffling ways before. Maybe it was a grocery list that got caught in the draft. Maybe it was some forgotten note Victoria had written to herself and shoved up there in a moment of distraction. It wasn't. It was a handwritten note. One word. A name. Leo. Now, I've been married to Victoria for 11 years. I know her handwriting like I know the way she fake laughs at my jokes when we're in public. This was hers, no doubt about it. Still, a name wasn't exactly incriminating. Maybe she was brainstorming baby names for the child we were absolutely never having. Maybe it was a character in one of those overly dramatic books she read, where people always seem to be running through airports to declare their love. But deep down, something felt off. So I did what any rational husband would do. I climbed down, sat on the couch, and stared at that name like it was about to sprout legs and explain itself. And that's when Victoria walked in. "Did you fix the fan?" she asked, oblivious to the fact that my entire understanding of the world had just shifted ever so slightly. I glanced at the ladder, still unfolded in the middle of the living room. The toolbox open, the fan still making its dying walrus noise. "Yeah," I said. "All fixed. Because here's the thing. I wasn't about to throw out some wild accusation based on one piece of paper. Not yet. That would make me look like a crazy person. No, I needed more. I needed context. I needed, who's Leo? I hadn't meant to say it. It just came out. A perfectly neutral question, but one that immediately made Victoria stop mid-step. For exactly half a second, she didn't react. Then, she did something unexpected. She laughed. "Leo? What? Are you going through my notebooks now?" Now, in hindsight, that should have been my first clue. Innocent people ask, "Who's Leo?" back. Innocent people furrow their brows and look confused. Innocent people don't immediately assume they've been caught snooping. But I played it cool. Shrugged. Found the name written down. Just curious. She waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, come on, Adam. I write down names all the time. Could be anything. A coworker, something from a book, a note for an old project. Who knows? You and your conspiracy theories." And with that, she walked off. Most men, at this point, would have let it go. Maybe I would have too if not for what happened 2 days later. I was at work, sitting in a meeting that had all the excitement of watching paint dry, when I glanced down at my notebook, and there it was. Leo. Not written by me. Not there the day before. Someone had written it in my notebook. My stomach did that slow, sinking thing it does when you realize something is very, very wrong. Because here's the thing. There was only one other person in our house with access to my stuff. Victoria. Now, I don't know what kind of mind games my wife thought she was playing, but I was officially invested. So, I did what any logical man would do. I started looking for Leo. Not in the obvious ways. No phone snooping. No direct questioning. I just listened. Paid attention. And before long, the pieces started coming together. Because suddenly, Victoria had new habits, new places to be, a yoga class that didn't line up with any local schedules, a friend named Lena she was suddenly spending a lot of time with, but who, mysteriously, never seemed to text her. And then came the weirdest part. I came home one evening to find Victoria sitting in the living room, smiling in that overly casual way people do when they've got something to hide. "Hey, babe," she said, flipping through a magazine. "I was thinking we should repaint the bedroom. Maybe a nice light blue." Victoria hated light blue. I didn't even respond. I just looked at her. And that's when I saw it. The tiniest, almost imperceptible movement. Her fingers tapping against her thigh, in a nervous rhythm. The same rhythm I had seen in myself a dozen times before. The rhythm of someone lying through their teeth. Leo was real. And my wife, my wonderful, seemingly devoted wife, was about to prove to me just how real he was. To be continued. It's amazing how quickly a person can go from a normal husband who occasionally forgets to take out the trash to a full-time private investigator with a specialization in who the hell is Leo. All it takes is a single piece of evidence that doesn't belong where you found it, a wife with suspicious hand movements, and a brain that refuses to let go of a bad feeling. I gave myself a simple goal: find Leo. Not in an obsessive, crazy way, but in a logical, step-by-step process. If my wife was going to start scribbling secret names on random surfaces like some amateur spy with a bad memory, then I was going to find out why. And I didn't have to wait long. The first real clue came on a Thursday. Victoria had left her laptop open on the kitchen table, something she never did. Normally, it was glued to her side like a life support machine, always with the screen tilted just enough to keep me from seeing whatever thrilling email chain she was involved in. But this time, right there, unlocked, and practically begging me to take a peek. Now, let's be clear, I'm not the kind of guy who snoops. Not because I'm morally superior, but because I have this theory that if you go looking for something bad, you're going to find it. And once you find it, your life is ruined. So I prefer the blissful ignorance approach, which has worked pretty well for me for most of my life. But this was different. Victoria was hiding something. I knew it. She knew I knew it. And now her laptop was sitting there, acting like a poorly disguised invitation to confirm it. So I took the invitation. I didn't go straight to her messages or emails. That would be too obvious. No, I started with her search history. And that's when I saw it. How to fix a stuck apartment door lock. Now, on its own, this meant nothing. Doors get stuck all the time. But we lived in a house. We had no apartment. We had never had an apartment. The only way Victoria could possibly need to fix a stuck apartment door was if she had access to one. A normal man might have asked her about it. A smarter man might have ignored it. I, being neither normal nor smart in that moment, decided to investigate. And what better way to investigate than to check her recent locations? Now, I didn't expect much. Victoria wasn't the type to keep her location history turned on. She was paranoid about big tech tracking her every move, which was ironic, considering she willingly handed over every piece of personal information to online quizzes that told her what kind of bread matched her personality. But, for once, the universe did me a favor. One click, and there it was, a pin dropped at an unfamiliar address. Not just any address, but one that had been visited multiple times over the past 2 months. I stared at it for a long time, debating whether I wanted to take the next step. Because once you take that step, there's no going back. Then I closed the laptop, grabbed my keys, and went to see for myself. I expected a lot of things when I pulled up to the building. I expected to find some fancy high-rise, maybe a bachelor pad belonging to a man who had way more confidence than me. What I didn't expect was a retirement home. That's right. The great mystery of Leo had led me to Sunset Pines Senior Living Community. At this point, I had 3 options. Accept that I had lost my mind and go home. Call Victoria and ask why she was secretly spending time at a retirement home. Walk in and get some answers myself. Obviously, I went with option 3. The inside of the place smelled like mint gum and overcooked vegetables. A few residents were scattered around, some watching TV, others engaged in a fierce battle of checkers that, based on their expressions, might have had real money on the line. I approached the front desk, where a bored-looking woman in a name tag that read Linda was flipping through a magazine. "Can I help you?" she asked, barely looking up. "I'm looking for someone named Leo," I said, keeping my tone casual. Linda raised an eyebrow. "Last name?" I hesitated. I don't know his last name." That got me a full glance. And you are? Now, there were a lot of answers I could have given here. I could have said I was a relative. I could have pretended to be a long-lost friend. But in a moment of sheer panic, my brain picked the worst possible option. I'm his accountant. Linda blinked. His what? I cleared my throat. His accountant. Just following up on some financial matters. For a second, I thought I was about to get thrown out. But instead, Linda just shrugged. Leo doesn't have an accountant. Well, that was interesting. She went back to her magazine, clearly done with me. But I wasn't done. I needed to see this Leo guy for myself. So I did what any man in my situation would do. I walked down the hall like I belonged there and started looking for anything that might lead me to him. I passed a few doors, each with nameplates next to them. Room 103, Alice Peterson. Room 105, Gerald Thompson. Room 107, Leo Carter. Bingo. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. So I did something incredibly stupid. I turned the handle, and to my absolute shock, the door opened. Now, I'm not saying I broke into an old man's room. I'm just saying I stepped inside for research purposes. And that's when I saw it. Sitting on the nightstand, next to a pair of reading glasses and a half-finished crossword puzzle, was a framed photo. A framed photo of Victoria. And next to her, smiling like he had won the lottery, Leo, who was, unless my eyes were deceiving me, at least 80 years old. At this point, I had two thoughts running through my head. I was absolutely not prepared for whatever was going on. Victoria had some explaining to do. I grabbed the photo, took a quick picture of it with my phone, and got out of there before I ended up in a situation that required me to explain to an elderly man why I was loitering in his room. As I drove home, my mind raced with every possible scenario. Was Leo some long-lost relative? An old friend? Was Victoria secretly investing in retirement homes? Had she somehow gotten herself involved in the strangest financial scheme in history? I didn't know. But one thing was clear, whatever was happening, it was just getting started. And I was going to get to the bottom of it. There are moments in life when you realize you've completely lost control of the situation. It's like stepping on a treadmill that's already running at full speed. 1 second, you're upright, thinking you can handle it, and the next, you're flying backward with the grace of a malfunctioning crash test dummy. That's exactly how I felt walking into my house after discovering that my wife, Victoria, had some kind of connection to an 80-year-old man named Leo. I didn't announce my arrival. I needed time to think, to figure out what I was dealing with. So I went to my office, sat down at my desk, and stared at the picture I had taken of the framed photo from Leo's room. Victoria, standing next to an old man with the kind of grin people get when they're about to win a lawsuit. I needed to confront her. But not yet. Not without a plan. If I charged in demanding answers, she'd twist it around, act offended, maybe even accuse me of being paranoid. I'd seen enough courtroom dramas to know how the guilty react under pressure. No, I needed to be strategic. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I called my mother-in-law. Now, let's be clear, Margaret and I had a long history of mutual tolerance. She thought I lacked ambition. I thought she lacked basic human warmth. It was an understanding that had worked well for us over the years. But today, I needed information, and Margaret was my best bet. The phone rang twice before she answered. Adam. Her voice was sharp, like she had been expecting bad news and was mildly disappointed I wasn't delivering it. Margaret, I said, keeping my tone neutral. I need to ask you something. She sighed, which was her default reaction to my existence. What is it? I glanced at the picture again. Who's Leo? There was a pause. Not a long one, but just enough to make my stomach tighten. Why are you asking about Leo? She said carefully. That told me two things. 1, she definitely knew who he was. 2, she wasn't thrilled that I was asking. I came across the name, I said, keeping it vague. Just wondering if he's a family friend. Margaret made a noise that was somewhere between a scoff and a groan. Adam, if you're looking for family gossip, asked Victoria. I'm busy. And then she hung up. Now, Margaret had never been a woman of warmth or patience, but she was rarely this dismissive. If there was one thing she loved more than silently judging people, it was making sure everyone knew she had information they didn't. The fact that she shut me down so quickly only confirmed that this was something she didn't want to talk about, which meant I was absolutely going to find out more. The next move was obvious. If Margaret wasn't going to help, I needed to go straight to the source. Victoria was in the living room when I walked in, sitting on the couch with her laptop. She looked up. eyes briefly scanning me like she was checking for anything unusual in my expression. "You're home early," she said. "Yeah," I replied. "Had some free time. Thought I'd check in." She smiled, but there was something forced about it. "That's sweet." I sat down across from her, acting casual. "So, weird question. Who's Leo?" She didn't even blink. "Leo? Yeah." I leaned back, watching her closely. "Found the name written down the other day. Just wondering if he's someone I should know about." There was the slightest hesitation before she spoke. "Oh, he's just someone from my past." That was an interesting answer. Not a friend. Not a relative. Just someone from my past. "Old friend." I pressed. She shifted slightly, her fingers tapping the edge of the laptop. Sort of. Sort of. Fantastic. That cleared up nothing. I nodded like that was an acceptable response. "Funny, because I came across a picture of you two today." This time, she did react. Her fingers froze, her posture stiffened, and for the first time, she actually looked concerned. "A picture?" "Yeah," I said. "At Sunset Pines." Silence. A full, stretched-out moment of it. Then, instead of panicking or making excuses, she did something worse. She laughed. "Adam," she said, shaking her head. "What were you doing at a retirement home?" Now that right there? That was a classic deflection. A move straight out of the How to Dodge Uncomfortable Questions handbook. Suddenly, I was on trial for my actions instead of her explaining why she was hiding the fact that she knew an old man well enough to be in a framed photo with him. I shrugged. "I was in the area." "In the area?" she repeated, raising an eyebrow. "And you just decided to go into a retirement home?" I smiled. "You know me. Always looking for real estate opportunities." She let out a small laugh, but it didn't reach her eyes. "So you just wandered into a random man's room?" "He wasn't random," I said. "I was looking for Leo." At this point, she finally put down her laptop. "Why?" And there it was. The shift. The first sign that she wasn't just annoyed. I had actually cornered her. "I don't know," I said, keeping my voice even. "Maybe because my wife's name is written on a photo in his room? Maybe because you've been visiting him in secret?" For a split second, something flickered in her expression. Something close to panic. But she recovered quickly, exhaling like I was exhausting her. "Adam, this is ridiculous." "Is it?" "Yes." She crossed her arms. "Leo is, well, he's someone I used to know. A long time ago." I waited. She didn't continue. "And?" I said. "And what? And why have you been visiting him?" She sighed dramatically, as if I had just asked her to recite the Constitution backward. "Because he's sick." That was new. "Sick how?" She hesitated. "It's complicated." I nodded slowly. "Right. Well, since it's complicated, I'm going to need a little more than that." She gave me a tight smile. "Adam, I don't owe you an explanation for every single thing I do." That was an answer designed to end a conversation. Unfortunately for her, I wasn't in the mood to let this one go. "So let me get this straight," I said. "You've been sneaking off to visit an old man in a retirement home, keeping it a secret from me, and now that I've found out, your response is, 'I don't owe you an explanation.'" Victoria rubbed her temples like I was the unreasonable one. "Adam, I swear, it's nothing bad. It's just personal." "Personal." "Right. Because personal always means completely innocent." I stood up, nodding slowly. "All right. If that's the answer you're going with, then fine." She looked surprised. "That's it. For now," I said. Because I wasn't done. Not even close. Victoria had just confirmed what I already suspected. She was lying. And whatever secret she was keeping about Leo, I was going to find out. The first thing I did after Victoria tried to shut down the conversation was pour myself a drink. Not because I was overwhelmed or emotional. I just needed something to do with my hands while I processed the fact that my wife was absolutely lying to me. And not just a small, harmless lie, but the kind of lie that required multiple visits to a retirement home, a framed picture, and enough nervous fidgeting to make a guilty person's handbook. She thought she had shut me down. She thought that because she crossed her arms and used her "Adam, you're being ridiculous" tone, I'd just let it go. That was the part that really annoyed me. The absolute confidence that she could talk her way out of this, and I'd just move on like some clueless sitcom husband. So, naturally, I decided to do the opposite. I was going to get my answers, and I was going to have some fun doing it. Step 1, I needed more evidence. Victoria had slipped up by not expecting me to find out about Leo so soon. That meant there had to be more. Something she hadn't hidden well enough yet. Something I could find before she realized she needed to cover her tracks better. The most obvious place to look was our home office. Not because she kept secret files there like some poorly written movie villain, but because Victoria was a creature of habit. She had a system, and that system always involved keeping important things in the same places, no matter how much she thought she was being careful. So while she was in the shower, I took a little walk. Now, before anyone jumps in with Adam, isn't this a little extreme? Let me remind you, I wasn't snooping without reason. I wasn't some paranoid guy who suddenly decided his wife was cheating because she smiled at a waiter once. Victoria had hidden something, lied to my face, and since she had given me the absolute worst non-explanation of all time, I had no problem digging a little deeper. The first thing I found was an envelope, not hidden in some drawer with a lock, not taped under a desk, just sitting there in a pile of other mail. It had her name on it, but the return address? Sunset Pines Senior Living Community. Interesting. I opened it carefully, because as much as I was investigating, I still had enough survival instincts to know that if I ripped it like some moron in a detective movie, I'd have a hard time putting it back. Inside was a bill. A bill with Victoria's name listed as the financial contact. A bill for Leo Carter's living expenses. Now, I'm not an expert on senior care, but I was pretty sure people didn't just randomly volunteer to pay for a stranger's retirement home, which meant that either Victoria was some kind of secret philanthropist, which she absolutely wasn't, or Leo was more than just someone from her past. And then I saw the note at the bottom. Balance paid in full. By Victoria. I took a picture of it and put everything back exactly how I found it. I wasn't going to confront her yet, not until I had the full picture. But now, I had more than just a gut feeling. Now, I had proof that she was financially involved with Leo. And that meant it was time for step 2. The revenge. Now, a lot of people, when they hear the word revenge, immediately picture something dramatic. Burning clothes on the lawn, public humiliation, some over-the-top act of destruction. That's amateur behavior. If you really want to get under someone's skin, you don't go for the obvious. You hit them where it hurts in ways they don't see coming. Victoria liked control. She liked knowing she had the upper hand in any situation. She liked being the one with the answers while everyone else was still trying to figure out the question. So I decided to take that away from her. I started with the small things. Victoria had a morning routine that was as precise as a military operation. Alarm at 6:30. Coffee at 6:45. A specific brand of facial cream at 7 o'clock. So I made tiny, barely noticeable changes. Set her alarm 5 minutes earlier. Replaced her coffee beans with a different roast, same brand. Just enough of a taste difference to make her question herself. Switched her facial cream with an identical-looking bottle of unscented lotion. Nothing drastic. Just enough to make her second guess whether she was losing her mind. Then, I moved on to the more enjoyable parts. Victoria had always prided herself on being organized. She kept lists, schedules, reminders for everything. So I started rearranging things. Moving important papers just slightly out of place. Deleting minor calendar events so she'd have to scramble at the last minute. Changing her go-to streaming profiles so she'd have to log in again and wonder why her usual recommendations were suddenly full of documentaries about betrayal and secrets. It was slow, subtle, just enough to create an underlying sense of chaos. And then, the best part. Victoria had no idea that I knew about the bill. She thought she was still in control of the information. So I started leaving little hints. I casually mentioned, "Hey, did you hear about that scandal with caregivers taking advantage of patients?" during dinner. A printed out article about secret families left on the coffee table. A question like, "Do you think people ever lie about helping someone when they're actually hiding something?" Just small things. Just enough to make her wonder. And it worked. I could see it in the way she hesitated before answering simple questions. The way she glanced at me when she thought I wasn't looking. The way her fingers tapped against the counter just a little more aggressively when she was pretending to be unbothered. She knew something was off. She just didn't know how much I knew. And that was the best part. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't throwing accusations. I was waiting. Because the best revenge wasn't some explosive confrontation. It was watching Victoria slowly realize that she was no longer the one pulling the strings. And I was just getting started. Victoria had always been good at controlling conversations. She had this ability to shift the focus, twist words, and make herself look like the reasonable one no matter what. It was a skill, really. A trained technique, perfected over years of being the smartest person in every room she walked into. But lately, she wasn't so sure. I could see it in the way she watched me when she thought I wasn't looking. The hesitation in her responses. The way she had started testing the waters, throwing out random comments just to gauge my reaction. Like last night, when she suddenly sighed and said, "You know, sometimes I feel like life is just overwhelming." Overwhelming. Right. Because nothing makes life more stressful than having a husband who might be figuring out that you're hiding a secret senior citizen on the side. I played along. "Oh yeah." She nodded, staring at her phone like she was lost in deep thought. "Just things. Responsibilities. People expecting things from you all the time." She was fishing, testing to see if I'd take the bait and ask, what kind of responsibilities? But I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. So I shrugged. "Yeah, life's tough." Then I took a sip of my drink and went back to scrolling through my own phone. That was the moment I knew she was nervous. Because normally, that's when she would have dropped it and moved on. But instead, she doubled down. "I was thinking," she said, setting her phone down. "Maybe we should take a trip. Just the two of us." Now that was hilarious. I glanced at her. "A trip?" "Yeah," she said, forcing a smile. "We've both been so busy. Maybe it would be good for us." She wasn't wrong. We had both been busy, her with hiding things and me with slowly unraveling her lies. But the fact that she thought a weekend getaway was going to magically erase the problem was genuinely impressive. I leaned back in my chair. "Where were you thinking?" She blinked, like she hadn't actually expected me to entertain the idea. I don't know. Somewhere quiet. A change of scenery." That was the thing with Victoria. She was always 3 steps ahead in every argument. But when she wasn't expecting resistance, she stumbled. She had thrown out the trip idea expecting me to either reject it outright, making me look like the difficult one, or enthusiastically agree, giving her the opportunity to redirect my attention. But now she had to actually come up with a plan, and she hadn't thought that far ahead. I nodded. "I'll look into it." She forced another smile. "That'd be great." We both knew that trip wasn't happening. The real problem was that Victoria still thought she could fix this. She thought she could steer this mess into another direction, pull out some grand emotional plea when the time came, and get me to let it go. And right on schedule, it happened. The next evening, I walked into the living room and found her sitting on the couch, staring at the floor. Perfectly staged. The dim lighting. The subtle, tragic expression. The kind of scene designed to make a husband feel guilty without even knowing why. I played along. "Something wrong." She exhaled like she had the weight of the world on her shoulders. "I don't know how to say this." That was the opening line. The moment where she made herself look fragile, hesitant. It was a classic Victoria move. I sat down across from her. "Just say it." She rubbed her arms like she was trying to comfort herself. "I feel like you're being distant lately." I almost laughed. Distant? That was rich, coming from the woman who had been sneaking off to a retirement home and lying about it. But I kept my expression neutral. "I've just had a lot on my mind." She nodded slowly. "I know, and that's why I wanted to talk. Because I feel like something's changed between us." It was a smart move. She wasn't denying anything. She was shifting the issue onto me. Suddenly, the problem wasn't that she was lying. It was that I was acting different. She sighed. I want to be honest with you, Adam. About everything." And there it was. The moment she had been building toward. The grand reveal, where she'd carefully select which version of the truth she wanted to give me, making herself look as sympathetic as possible. I let her talk. "I've been struggling with a lot," she continued, her voice carefully controlled to sound just a little unsteady. "Things from my past. Things I haven't really dealt with." She paused, waiting for me to ask what things. But I stayed silent. She continued. "Leo, he's connected to that." I gave her nothing. No reaction. No expression. Just silence. She shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't tell you about him because it's painful, and I was afraid of how you'd react. But it's not what you think." That part was true. It wasn't what I thought. It was something worse. She leaned forward, lowering her voice like she was letting me in on some heartbreaking secret. "Leo is my biological father." That was a new one. I raised an eyebrow. "You're what?" She nodded, wrapping her arms around herself like she was bracing for impact. "I found out a few months ago. He reached out to me. I didn't know how to handle it. That's why I didn't tell you." Now, I had to give her credit for this one. It was a fantastic lie. Just enough emotional weight to make me feel guilty for doubting her. Just enough vagueness to keep me from asking too many direct questions. If I hadn't already seen the bill with her name listed as the person financially responsible for him, I might have believed her. I nodded slowly. That's a lot to process. She nodded too, eyes shining just enough to suggest tears were on standby. I know, and I should have told you sooner. I was just scared. I didn't want to lose you. I had to fight the urge to applaud. This was an expert-level manipulation. She had successfully flipped the situation from her lying to me potentially abandoning her in a time of need. I leaned forward, mirroring her posture. So let me get this straight. Leo is your father. You just found out. And you've been visiting him in secret because you didn't know how to tell me. She swallowed hard. Yes. I let that sit in the air for a moment, just long enough to make her think I was buying it. Then I smiled. Victoria, you're an amazing liar. Her face froze. What? I leaned back. That was good. Really. The pacing, the emotion, the whole, I was scared to tell you routine. Solid effort. Her expression hardened. Adam. I cut her off. The only problem? I already know you've been paying his bills. Silence. I nodded. Yeah. Found that little detail earlier this week. So if this is some brand new discovery of yours, I'd love to hear why you've been financially responsible for him for months. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time in our entire marriage, she was speechless. I stood up. Let me know when you're ready to tell me the real story. And then I walked away, leaving her sitting there, realizing she had lost control for the first time in her life. And I enjoyed every second of it. Victoria didn't speak to me for the next 24 hours. Not a single word. No sarcastic comments. No fake small talk. Not even a passive-aggressive sigh. That alone was proof that I had successfully dismantled whatever illusion she had been hoping to keep up. And honestly, I enjoyed it. Because for the first time in our entire marriage, I was the one in control. I was the one making her squirm. And the best part? I didn't even have to yell, argue, or throw accusations. I had simply told the truth, and that alone had been enough to leave her speechless. But of course, I knew she wasn't done. Victoria wasn't the type to accept defeat quietly. She was just regrouping, figuring out a new strategy. And sure enough, it happened the next evening. I was in my office, pretending to go over some emails, when she finally appeared in the doorway. She didn't walk in right away. She just stood there, like she was waiting for some kind of invitation. I didn't give her one. After a moment, she let out a slow breath. Can we talk? I kept my face neutral. Sure. She hesitated again before stepping inside. But instead of launching into some carefully crafted speech, she did something unexpected. She sat down, folded her hands in her lap, and looked directly at me. I know I messed up, she said. Interesting. A confession, but not the confession. This was a test. She wanted to see if admitting to something vaguely wrong would be enough to get me to soften up. I stayed silent. She took that as her cue to continue. I should have told you about Leo. I know that now. But it wasn't because I was trying to hurt you. No, of course not. Victoria would never intentionally do something wrong. It was always circumstances, misunderstandings, or someone else's fault. I leaned back in my chair. So why did you do it? She hesitated just long enough for me to know she was deciding which version of the story to tell. I was embarrassed, she finally said. That was unexpected. Embarrassed about what? She exhaled sharply, shaking her head like she was struggling with some great internal turmoil. I didn't want to seem weak, Adam. I raised an eyebrow. Weak? She nodded. Leo, he helped me. A long time ago, and I felt like I owed him. But I didn't want you to think I couldn't handle things on my own, so I tried to deal with it myself. She had officially entered the guilt trip phase. Instead of admitting the actual problem, she was trying to frame herself as the selfless victim who had simply been burdened by her own misguided nobility. I wasn't buying it. I shrugged. Okay. That clearly wasn't the response she was expecting. Okay. Yeah, I said. I mean, you've already proven you can handle things on your own, right? So I'm just letting you. She blinked, clearly thrown off. What does that mean? It means, I said, standing up, I don't think there's anything left to talk about. Now she looked genuinely panicked. Adam, wait. No, I said. You don't get to do this. You don't get to sit there and act like you're the one who was struggling while I was the clueless husband who just didn't understand. She stood up too, her eyes wide. That's not what I'm saying. Yeah, it is, I said. You lied. And not just once. Repeatedly. And when I caught you, your first reaction wasn't to tell the truth. It was to come up with another lie. Her jaw clenched. I was scared. Scared of what? I asked. That I'd find out you've been financially supporting another man behind my back. She flinched. That was it. The real truth. The one she had spent weeks trying to avoid. I let out a breath and shook my head. I don't care anymore, Victoria. That was when I saw it. The split second of genuine fear in her eyes. Not fear of me, not fear of confrontation. Fear of losing. Because she had always been able to manipulate a situation, twist the narrative, get back in control. But now, she had nothing left. I walked to the closet, grabbed a bag I had already packed the night before, and slung it over my shoulder. Her expression changed immediately. What are you doing? Leaving, I said simply. Her face went pale. Wait. No. Adam, we need to talk about this. We are talking, I said. For the first time in a long time, we're actually talking. And I think we both know how this ends. She stepped forward, reaching out like she wanted to stop me. Please, Adam, don't do this. I sighed, shaking my head. Victoria, I already did. And with that, I walked out. No dramatic goodbye. No final argument. Just done. Because in the end, the best way to win against someone like Victoria wasn't to fight. It wasn't to scream or demand an apology. It was to walk away. And that's exactly what I did. The end. Thanks for watching. Rate the story in the comments. Subscribe to the channel